Number 9. Chad Reed. 53-year-old Michigan landlord Chad Reed was accused of murdering his 2 tenants in October of 2020. Joseph Soule and his girlfriend Jacqueline Liepard, both in their early 30s, had rented an upstairs room at Reed's Battle Creek home. It was reported that Reed and his tenants didn't get along. They fought about money, and the landlord had also repeatedly confronted the couple about their partying, which kept him up at night. After killing Soule and Liepard, Reed stashed their bodies in the back of his truck for about a week. Once the couple was reported missing, the police came to his home but found no evidence of foul play. Reed would eventually surrender to the authorities and confess to the double homicide. This occurred at roughly the same time as the police had received a tip from a source who knew Reed, claiming that the tenants had been killed. The landlord stated that he'd shot Soule after he pulled a knife on him during an argument. He opened fire on Liepard as she attempted to run away from the house. Reed then strangled, stabbed, and beat her to death with a metal pipe. A few days after his arrest, a fire broke out at the home, destroying most of the victim's possessions. It's unclear what connection, if any, the landlord had had with the blaze. Number 8. Lorenzo Simon. In April of 2014, landlord Lorenzo Simon stabbed his tenant in the neck when he complained of the handiwork he was forced to do around his apartment in Birmingham, England. 34-year-old Simon had reportedly accepted Michael Spaulding as a tenant in exchange for his handyman skills. By multiple accounts, Spaulding was treated horrendously by Simon in what the authorities described as slave labor. He was given only 1 meal per day and forced to work on the apartment from the early hours of the morning until past midnight. The handyman wasn't allowed to go out unless his landlord gave him permission. Spaulding eventually complained about the inhumane treatment, and an argument erupted with Simon. Neighbors heard him saying he was tired and hungry, to which the landlord responded aggressively. Investigators later determined that he'd also accused Spaulding of damaging his Volkswagen Passat in a crash. As the fight escalated, Simon fatally stabbed his tenant. He used a hacksaw to dismember his body, which he placed into 2 suitcases and then dumped in the Birmingham Canal. In May of 2014, the suitcases were recovered from the water, one containing Spaulding's torso and the other his head, limbs, and the tools used in the dismemberment. The police traced the killing back to Simon, who denied any wrongdoing. However, testimonies from neighbors with reports of a bonfire in the garden and the subsequent discovery of a humerus bone fragment inside a charred drum were enough to secure an arrest. Simon would later confess to his crime and was jailed for 19 years. Number 7. Jerry David Thompson. In July of 2020, a tenant decapitated his landlord with a samurai sword following a rent dispute. 64-year-old Victor King, a professional bridge player, was attacked at his Connecticut home by tenant Jerry David Thompson. A day earlier, King had reported 42-year-old Thompson to the police for waving the sword at him over a rent dispute. The authorities were alerted once more when King's friends hadn't heard from him. Officers went to the house in Hartford and found his lifeless body on the kitchen floor. He'd been slashed, beheaded, and then partially covered with a sheet. A manhunt ensued and the police arrested Thompson. He told the authorities that all they needed was a piece of paper from the glove compartment of his Jeep. According to the paperwork, Thompson, who had prior convictions for assault and robbery, saw himself as a sovereign citizen and hence not subject to the law. The suspected murderer refused to provide any details about the atrocious killing and was held on a $2 million bail. Number 6. Patrick Maher. In February of 2021, a Maine tenant fatally stabbed his landlord in what was regarded by the authorities as an unprovoked attack. 24-year-old Patrick Maher had been renting a room from Troy and Dulcie Varney. In the days leading up to the double homicide, a relative of the couple claimed that Dulcie had become afraid of the tenant. One of Maher's family members reported that in recent weeks, he'd been struggling with depression over lockdown restrictions. He ambushed his landlords with a knife and started stabbing them repeatedly. The police responded to a home invasion call at the couple's Turner property at around 1:30 a.m. Even though he'd been severely wounded, it was reported that Troy had put up a fight and managed to hold on to Maher until the officers arrived at the scene. Both Troy and Dulcie were later pronounced dead at a hospital in Lewiston. The tenant was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. Number 5. Daniel Walsh. In 2020, a tenant from Derbyshire, England was found guilty of murdering his landlord and then feeding parts of his body to badgers. In June of that year, 71-year-old Graham Snell had gone to a police station to complain that his tenant, 30-year-old Daniel Walsh, had been stealing money from his bank account. The following morning, an officer arrived at the man's property, but there was no answer, and the calls to his cell phone went straight to voicemail. Walsh subsequently visited a DIY store where he purchased 10 garbage bags and 2 saws, which he used to dispose of the body. In the following days, Walsh made several trips to casinos, arcades, and massage parlors with the money he was able to obtain from the elderly man's account after his death. When the police examined the area in early July, they found pieces of Snell's body buried in the woods nearby. Many of the remains had been pushed down a badger den, and the animals had reportedly nibbled on them. Following Walsh's arrest, it took a jury just over an hour to unanimously find him guilty of murdering the elderly landlord. Number 4. Michael Dudley. In June of 2020, Seattle landlord Michael Dudley was charged with 2 counts of murder in the second degree for the killing of his tenants Jessica Lewis and Austin Wenner. It's believed that 35-year-old Lewis and Wenner, aged 27, were murdered following a dispute over rent. Neighbors called 911 and reported hearing gunfire. According to one witness, a man had yelled out, "Please, don't do this. Just let me leave," before the shots were heard. There was no response at the residence when the police arrived. When they obtained a search warrant, officers found bullet holes and blood inside one of the rooms. Dudley dismembered the bodies and disposed of the remains in bags throughout various bodies of water. Several days after the police had been called to the property, a suitcase was found on a West Seattle beach by TikTok users. They'd opened it, believing it held valuables, but were immediately overcome by the smell. They called the police and posted the footage of the bodies being found, which subsequently became viral. Based on the analysis of a forensic anthropologist, Dudley may have had accomplices. The cuts on the victims' bodies were disorganized and executed in different manners with various devices. Number 3. Scott Edmund Pettigrew. On June the 14th of 2016, Mimi Anita Cohen was found floating face down in the swimming pool of her home in Palm Springs, California. A few days earlier, the 65-year-old woman had gone to the police to ask for a restraining order against her tenant, Scott Edmund Pettigrew. She'd agreed to let him a room back in February, and his behavior gradually became more erratic in the months that followed. He'd poured water over the woman's computer, stolen her food, and allowed his dogs to defecate in the house. He'd only paid 1 month's rent and would threaten the landlady whenever she'd question him about the money. Cohen told the police that she lived in constant fear of what Pettigrew would do next. In spite of the woman's complaints, the court didn't evict Pettigrew and gave him a 5-yard restraining order. Less than a week later, he killed Cohen. When the police arrived to find Cohen unresponsive in the pool, they also found 50-year-old Pettigrew inside the house, lying naked on his bed. His body was covered in scratches. The police found a digital audio recorder under the kitchen table. In the audio file, which was about 1 minute long, a woman was heard shouting over the sounds of an altercation. Investigators believed that the voice was Cohen's, screaming at her attacker to go away and leave her alone. Pettigrew was charged with murder along with elder abuse and the violation of a protective order. Today's topic was requested by Riteen Dan, Warpath, and Javon Knight. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Alec Garces. In January of 2020, a landlord from Queens, New York was killed by his tenant as he tried to collect $200 in unpaid rent. While talking on the phone with his wife, 71-year-old Edgar Moncayo arrived at the property he owned in the Corona neighborhood. His tenant, 22-year-old Alex Garces, answered the front door and an altercation ensued as Moncayo tried to enter the property. The fight was captured by a doorbell camera. Garces pushed the elderly man down the flight of stairs leading up to the front door. Moncayo landed on his back and sustained a devastating injury as his head snapped into the concrete. He was taken to Elmhurst Hospital and put on life support but was eventually pronounced dead. In the incident's aftermath, Garces was charged with manslaughter. Number 1. Lee family. In 2017, a horrific quadruple homicide occurred in Qingdao, one of China's most modern cities. 40-year-old Li Jizong, his wife and his parents lived in a rented apartment on the 5th floor of a residential building. The apartment's owner, the Ji family, lived upstairs on the 6th floor. After the landlord had come to the apartment to ask for the overdue rent, Li planned to kidnap and rob the Ji family. He convinced his wife and parents to join him. They first lured the landlord and head of the Ji family under the pretense that the TV was broken. Afterwards, they tricked his wife by pretending they were going to sign a new contract. Next, they lured the couple's adult children. All members of the Ji family were bound and suffocated. The Li family then robbed their flat before fleeing to Beijing on November the 15th. All were apprehended the following day. They pled guilty and were sentenced to death. Thanks for watching. What's your worst tenant or landlord experience? Let us know in the comments section below.